Fire Tim Cook. It's a headline that seems to pop up with surprising regularity. Pundits, analysts, and even some dedicated fans are calling for his head. They claim he's stumbled with major launches like Apple Intelligence. They whisper that he's not a true product person, a pale shadow of his legendary predecessor, Steve Jobs. They accuse him of letting Apple's iconic design-focused culture wither on the vine. So, with this storm of criticism swirling around him, why isn't Tim Cook packing his bags? Why is the chief executive officer of the world's most scrutinized company not only completely safe in his role, but very likely about to receive the ultimate promotion? Today, we are taking you inside the impenetrable fortress of the Apple boardroom to uncover the real story. We will expose the one staggering fact that makes Tim Cook bulletproof, a number so powerful it silences any and all dissent. We'll dissect the serious accusations leveled against him, from missteps in artificial intelligence to a supposed decade-long drought of breakthrough hardware, and see if they hold any water. And most intriguingly, we will reveal the quiet succession plan being whispered about in the halls of Cupertino, a plan that could see Tim Cook ascend to the very pinnacle of power at Apple, becoming the chairman of the board. Is Tim Cook the quiet financial genius who has secured Apple's dominance for a generation? Or is he the caretaker manager who is slowly letting the company's innovative magic fade away? Stick with us as we break it all down. Let's start by looking at the charges laid at Tim Cook's door, because they aren't trivial. The most recent and perhaps most visible stumble has been the rollout of Apple Intelligence. What was meant to be Apple's grand entry into the generative AI race has been perceived by some as a series of missteps and confusing messaging, leaving the company looking like it's playing catch-up to rivals like Google and Microsoft. This feeds into a larger, more persistent criticism that has followed Cook for his entire tenure, that he just isn't a product visionary in the same vein as Steve Jobs. Jobs was famous for his obsessive focus on product, his reality distortion field, and his almost supernatural ability to intuit what consumers wanted before they knew it themselves. Cook, on the other hand, is universally acknowledged as an operational and supply chain genius. He's the man who made Apple's global machine run with ruthless efficiency. But the critics argue that this focus on logistics has come at a cost. They point to an alleged erosion of the company's design-first culture, the very soul that Johnny Ive and Steve Jobs so carefully cultivated. This is the heart of the conflict in perception. Steve Jobs was the ultimate artist founder, a passionate, often volatile leader who would publicly wage thermonuclear war on competitors. Tim Cook is the consummate professional chief executive officer, a calm, measured, and intensely private diplomat. Where Jobs led with gut instinct and revolutionary fervor, Cook leads with data, spreadsheets, and methodical execution. The charge is that this shift has turned Apple from a revolutionary into an incumbent, a company that perfects existing categories rather than inventing new ones. Is the pursuit of predictable profit margins and flawless product cycles dulling the cutting edge that once defined Apple? It's a question that hangs heavy in the air. This narrative of decline is further fueled by the accusation of what some have called a decade-long drought of breakthrough mainstream hardware. The argument goes that since the iPad, which was a Steve Jobs-era product, Apple hasn't launched a truly new, category-defining device that has captured the public imagination in the same way as the Mac, the iPod, or the iPhone. They see a company iterating on existing successes rather than inventing the future. With a rap sheet like that, at almost any other multi-trillion-dollar corporation, the board of directors would be having some very serious, very uncomfortable meetings. The pressure from shareholders and the market would be immense. But at Apple, the boardroom is quiet. The chair remains firmly behind Tim Cook. And the reason why is both incredibly simple and absolutely staggering. So, what is the secret to Tim Cook's invincibility? It's not a secret weapon or a cunning political strategy. It's a single number. When Tim Cook took over as chief executive officer from a gravely ill Steve Jobs, Apple was already a corporate titan. But what Cook has done since is nothing short of miraculous from a financial perspective.
Under his leadership, Apple shares have soared by approximately 1,500%. Let me repeat that, because it's a figure that's difficult to comprehend. 1,500%. That is the kind of growth that turns a successful company into a global economic superpower. It's the kind of performance that makes board members and investors view a chief executive officer not just as a manager, but as a legend. While pundits debate the merits of a new iPhone feature, Tim Cook has added trillions of dollars in value to the company. And in the world of corporate governance, that kind of value creation is the ultimate shield. It deflects any and all criticism. A 16% dip in the stock in 2025, largely attributed to the unpredictable whims of political tariffs? In the grand scheme of 1,500% growth, it's a rounding error, a minor blip on a chart that points almost vertically to the heavens. To put it in perspective, the value Cook has added is larger than the entire gross domestic product of most countries on Earth. He took a giant and turned it into a leviathan of unimaginable scale. But his safety isn't just about the money, it's also about the people. The Apple board of directors is reportedly filled with what can only be described as Cook loyalists. Names like Arthur Levinson, Susan Wagner, and Ronald Sugar are key figures who have been on the board for years. This isn't an activist board looking to shake things up. It's a board that has presided over this period of unprecedented growth and has, by all accounts, rarely interfered with Cook's day-to-day running of the company. They trust him implicitly. Why wouldn't they? He has delivered results that have exceeded even the wildest expectations. A 1,500% growth. That's a number that buys an incredible amount of loyalty and trust. If you find that fact as mind-blowing as we do us a favor and hit that like button to let us know. It really helps our channel bring you more deep dives into the stories behind the headlines. Now, let's circle back to that particularly sharp criticism, the decade-long drought of breakthrough mainstream hardware. This is a favorite talking point for those who argue Apple has lost its innovative spark. But is it actually true? The narrative conveniently ignores a product that launched in 2021 and almost immediately became a global phenomenon. I'm talking, of course, about AirTags. Think about it. Before AirTags, the market for personal item trackers was a niche category. Apple entered and, in typical Apple fashion, created a product that was so seamlessly integrated into its ecosystem that it felt like magic. Suddenly, these little white discs were everywhere. They were on keychains, in wallets, attached to luggage, and even on pet collars. They became ubiquitous, a mainstream success by any definition. While an AirTag might not have the same cultural impact as the original iPhone, to dismiss it as insignificant is to fundamentally misunderstand how Apple innovates in the modern era. The company is no longer just about creating blockbuster new hardware categories from scratch every few years. It's also about strengthening its ecosystem, creating products and services that make being an Apple user more convenient, more powerful, and stickier. The Apple Watch, while launched under Cook, has become the world's dominant smartwatch and a serious health device. AirPods created and continue to dominate the entire true wireless headphone market. To say there have been no hardware successes is to ignore the billions of dollars and market dominance these products represent. More importantly, this criticism ignores perhaps the most significant hardware innovation of the Cook era, one that happened right at the heart of its most iconic product line, Apple Silicon. The transition of the Mac from Intel processors to Apple's own M-series chips was a monumental undertaking, a bet-the-company move that has been a staggering success. It was a fundamental reimagining of what a personal computer could be, delivering an unprecedented combination of power and efficiency that competitors are still struggling to match years later. This wasn't just an iteration, it was a revolution at the silicon level, a move that only a company with deep expertise in hardware, software, and chip design could pull off. And it happened entirely on Tim Cook's watch. The drought narrative is a compelling one, but it falls apart under closer inspection. Apple is still shipping massively successful and deeply innovative hardware. It's just that the nature of that hardware and its role in the ecosystem has evolved. So if Tim Cook cannot be fired, what does his future look like? Does he simply continue as chief executive officer indefinitely? Well, Cook himself has given us a clue. Around the time the AirTags were launched, he suggested that he would probably retire from Apple before the end of the next decade. This set off a flurry of speculation about his potential successor. But a new, fascinating scenario is now emerging, one that suggests his departure from the chief executive officer role might not be a departure from Apple at all. To understand this, we have to look at the top of the pyramid, the chairman of Apple's board, Arthur Levinson. Levinson is a titan of the industry and a long-time, steady hand on the Apple tiller. He is also now older than the board's own recommended retirement age of 75. Another key board member, Ronald Sugar, is in the same position. This isn't just a guideline, it's a policy that Apple has followed. We saw this in 2024 when two other long-serving board members, former Vice President Al Gore and James Bell, both stepped down from the board precisely because they had reached the age of 75. The precedent has been set. It seems inevitable that Arthur Levinson, the current chairman, will step down in the near future. And who is the leading candidate to succeed him? None other than Tim Cook himself. The move from chief executive officer to chairman of the board is a classic endgame for a highly successful corporate leader. It would allow Cook to step away from the intense, day-to-day operational pressures of running the company while still maintaining ultimate oversight and influence over its strategic direction. This move would be the ultimate expression of his stewardship, evolving from the hands-on operator to the elder statesman. As chairman, he could focus on the biggest picture of all, Apple's place in the world, its long-term technological bets, and the cultivation of its next generation of leaders. What would a Chairman Cook truly mean for the future of Apple? The immediate take from some reports is that this move would give him an even tighter grip on the iPhone maker. On the surface, this makes sense. The chairman holds significant authority, setting the agenda for the board and guiding its decisions. However, it's also a bit of a stretch, given what we know about the current dynamic. The board, led by Levinson, has already given Cook almost complete autonomy to run the company as he sees fit. How much tighter can the grip get when it's already absolute? It's more likely that this transition would be less about a power grab and more about ensuring continuity and legacy. As chairman, Cook could oversee the transition to a new chief executive officer, mentoring them and ensuring that the operational and financial discipline he instilled remains at the core of the company. He would be the ultimate guardian of the culture he has built over the last decade and a half. It would be a way to cement his place in Apple's history, not just as the successor to Jobs, but as the architect of its long-term sustainable global dominance. This potential move is the ultimate checkmate against his critics. While they are busy debating his product decisions, he is positioning himself to oversee the entire company from the highest possible vantage point. The narrative shifts from, should we fire Tim Cook, to what will Apple look like under the guidance of Chairman Tim Cook? The future of the world's most valuable company is being shaped by these quiet maneuvers in the boardroom. If you want to stay ahead of the curve on what's next for Apple and other tech giants, make sure you're subscribed and have those notifications turned on. You absolutely will not want to miss our next investigation. So we are left with a fascinating portrait of power and perception. Tim Cook, the man constantly compared to his predecessor and criticized for a perceived lack of vision, stands unassailable. He is protected by a shield of pure, unadulterated financial success, a staggering 1,500% increase in value that has made his board loyal and his position secure. The critiques about his leadership style, the Apple intelligence stumbles, and the so-called hardware drought, while making for great headlines, ultimately bounce off this golden shield. And now he appears to be planning his final act not as a retiree, but as an ascendant. The path seems clear for him to move from the chief executive officer's office to the chairman's seat, a move that would solidify his control and shape his legacy for decades to come. Is Tim Cook the financial architect who took Steve Jobs' brilliant but volatile creation and turned it into a stable, globe-spanning empire?
Or is he the caretaker who, in the process of maximizing efficiency, has traded away the chaotic, revolutionary spirit that once made Apple so special? The truth, as always, is likely somewhere in between. But one thing is certain, the era of Tim Cook is far from over. He has weathered every storm, silenced every serious call for his removal, and is now poised to take the final seat of power. The next chapter of Apple's story will be written under his watch, one way or another. And it promises to be the most intriguing one.